Tonight, doctors bracing for the worst.
It makes me very uncomfortable. It's morally distressing. It's terrible for patients.
ICU doctors may have to start making life or death decisions for some patients, what they are being told to prepare for as COVID-19 continues to overwhelm hospitals. Plus,
I want big box stores to pull up their socks and follow the rules.
Ontario launching a big box blitz, and more of your enforcement questions answered on day one of a province-wide stay-at-home order. And
why must they kill him?
It's been more than a year since Clive Mensa died after being tasered by Peel police. Now a new coroner's report is shedding light on the fatal encounter. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. Day one of Ontario's stay-at-home order coming to a close. It's hoped the new regulations will finally bring case counts down and lessen the strain on hospital ICUs. But as it stands right now, ICU doctors may see themselves in a position to make potential life or death decisions for some patients. Doctors have been sent a triage protocol and told to start preparing for it in case the situation gets bad enough. Angelina King has more.
It would be a heart-wrenching decision. Who does and does not get critical care?
I've never been in that position before. I didn't train for that. And that's the position we may be in a matter of weeks. And it makes me very uncomfortable. It's morally distressing.
The provincial government has sent out a triage protocol to critical care staff. It applies to anyone who may need life-saving care, not just COVID patients. The memo obtained by CBC News says the protocol is a last resort, but if there's a major surge and demand for critical care resources isn't manageable, it says it is inevitable that some who may have otherwise benefited from critical care will not receive it, and as a result, some will die who would otherwise have lived. It also includes risk assessment forms which would help doctors make those difficult decisions.
I go through their short-term mortality risk, which is a checklist, to determine or guesstimate how likely they are to be alive 12 months after their critical illness. And at level 1 triage, only those who are have a less than 80% chance of dying a year from now will be offered critical care. At level 3, it's less than 30%. That's pretty dramatic.
There are more than 1,600 people with COVID-19 in Ontario hospitals. 388 are in the ICU. 280 are on a ventilator.
People have died. People are sick. The healthcare workers are overwhelmed. Hospitals are close to shutting down.
The Ontario Critical Care COVID Command Centre sent the memo and would decide when the protocol gets implemented. Its incident commander said in part, to plan and ensure a common approach across the system, training and standardized tools have been shared with the sector so they can learn how to quickly operationalize an emergency standard of care, adding that it fits within the Healthcare Consent Act. There has been some criticism of these types of triage protocols. Ontario Health drafted guidelines back at the beginning of the pandemic and received backlash from several human rights organizations. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
CBC News spoke with an advocate for people with disabilities tonight. He also spoke out against an earlier version of the guidelines, and he's still worried this kind of triage could lead to discrimination.
The documents we've seen continue to risk patients with disabilities facing unfair discrimination against them because of their disabilities. It's wrapped up in a bunch of medical language, but it's still there.
The Ontario government says its approach aims to prevent bias. An emergency alert message was sent across the province today. That was the alert sent out advising people in Ontario that the stay-at-home order is in effect. People are now asked to leave home for only essential reasons, such as to buy food, for healthcare, exercise, or essential work. Despite the new order, don't expect to be pulled over on the street. Enforcement will generally still be complaint-driven, but the government is planning an enforcement blitz at big box stores this weekend, and customers not following the guidelines could face fines. Chris Glover has more.
Hours into Ontario's stay-at-home order, and people are ready to prove they're out for essential reasons.
Just I need some bread, that's all.
really essential.
The prescription in my pocket, I'm gonna go get it and then go home.
While officers can ask what your reason is, they won't demand written proof, and they'll have new powers to break up gatherings.
We are now taking steps to ask our peace officers, who have more powers to disperse outside gatherings, to render fines and to take action accordingly.
Still so many questions. Police services are pleading with people to stop calling 911 about the new order.
I don't think Ontarians are going to see a whole lot of change, not from their officers, frankly, because, again, we will not be randomly stopping people, stopping vehicles.
The order cannot be used against the homeless and won't let police into homes either. And Ontario's Association of Chiefs of Police pledge it'll be doled out equitably.
We don't want people from BIPOC communities to think that the police are going to use these new powers to somehow randomly, pull people over on the street.
Generally, enforcement will continue to be driven by complaints. But expect proactive enforcement at big box stores across the GTHA this weekend. 50 provincial health and safety inspectors will join local bylaw and police for a blitz, not only ensuring the store's COVID compliance, but starting Saturday, they'll be able to ticket customers for infractions as well.
It literally is all hands on deck to keep workers safe.
Still, it's not big box stores, but manufacturing and industrial plants leading to the vast majority of workplace transmission. The minister says while not part of this blitz, they're part of an overall beefed up enforcement plan.
We'll bring the hammer down if we have to on these businesses.
For us, it doesn't necessarily add any value.
Rather than provincial power with enforcement, York's medical officer says rapid testing is what's needed.
I think that is a game changer for us, because we would like to use that on our manufacturing plants and industrial plants.
So that big box store blitz is going to be taking place across the GTHA this weekend. Then it will be expanded across the province. And today, the minister said to date, there have been 34,000 inspections of businesses related to potential COVID infractions, and 55 businesses have been shut down as a result. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
What difference does a stay-at-home order make? Take a look at the differences between yesterday and today. Our CBC drone team captured an aerial view of the city from the DVP to Queen Street near Trinity Bellwoods to the Gardiner. It appears not too much of a difference in terms of vehicle traffic. Skating rinks in Toronto will be allowed to stay open during the stay-at-home order, the city allowing 25 skaters at a time, and everyone must wear a mask on or off the ice and while in line. For the second time in under a year, the provincial government has put a pause on residential evictions. The Landlord and Tenant Board will continue to hear eviction applications, but enforcement of those orders will be postponed unless an emergency eviction is required. The opposition is calling on the province to do more, including a moratorium on all eviction notices. Families of long-term care residents shared their stories to the Long-Term Care Commission today. They had loved ones in Sunnycrest. All but one of the residents at the Whitby home tested positive for COVID-19. 34 people died. Lorena Redicop has more.
Judy Melanson died on December 10th at Sunnycrest Nursing Home. Her cousin, Cindy Lunt, says it was hard to get information or find out just how bad the outbreak was.
We don't know anything until they're dying? Like, how is that possible?
She sent in an email statement to the Long-Term Care Commission. She's also part of a class action lawsuit. Other families are speaking to the commission via video.
These were people. They left them to die, and a lot of them did. I wanted the commission to know that, and nobody's going to be held accountable for their actions. I mean, there should have been, to me, this is criminal negligence.
In December, this home in Niagara Falls had an outbreak affecting almost all of the staff and residents. 30 people died. The Ontario Health Coalition hears from families across the province.
In some homes, there are not enough staff to feed the residents, period, to hydrate them and feed them. And the residents are losing weight, they're gaunt.
It's been calling for the military to be called in to hard-hit homes, something the Long-Term Care Ministry says isn't needed, saying, We have taken action to address urgent staffing shortages, including issuing management orders, enabling the deployment of hospital staff, and the use of infection prevention and control teams. This picture is from 2 days before Judy Melanson died. The last time she spoke to her cousin via FaceTime.
She could understand it was me. She said she couldn't see me. I said, I love you. And she said, I love you. And I said, I want you to go to sleep now. And she said, oh, you want me to go to sleep? And I said, yes. And then that was it. She never woke back up again.
She wants her cousin remembered and for others in long-term care to be protected. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
The SIU is investigating after a man was shot by police in Scarborough tonight. It happened in the area of Midland and Eglinton just before 8 o'clock. Police initially said several callers reported gunshots and cars fleeing the area. The victim was taken to hospital with serious but not life-threatening injuries. 2 people have been taken into custody. Anyone with information is asked to contact the SIU. An American man killed last night is Toronto's first murder victim of 2021. He was stabbed in an apartment building also in the Eglinton and Midland area. Police arrived on scene to find people performing CPR on the victim. The man later died in hospital. He has been identified as 25-year-old Mohammed Jalani of Minnesota. A suspect wearing a dark top and light pants was last seen minutes after police got the 911 call. Anyone with information or video from the area at the time is asked to reach out to investigators. And we're learning more about how a Mississauga man died after an interaction with Peel police. More than a year after Clive Mensah's death, the province's police watchdog still hasn't released its findings on the incident. But a coroner's report obtained by CBC News is revealing a more detailed picture of the moments leading up to Mensah's death. Trevor Dunn has this story.
Prescription medications, right?
Stephen Boache and William Owusu go over the coroner's report into the death of their nephew. It's the first real window they've had into the incident more than a year after it happened.
It's like I'm always in the dark.
And it was dark the morning of November 20th, 2019. 30-year-old Clive Mensah was outside of his Mississauga group home. A neighbor called police because of a man making noise in the area. According to the coroner's report, arriving officers followed Mensah into his backyard. He was told to lie face down. The report says Mensah obeyed but continued to flail his arms. He was tasered. The report says Mensah then became combative and aggressive. He was tasered again, 6 times in total. 3 officers piled on top of him. Mensah was pepper sprayed in the face, but soon he would suddenly stop moving. After being delayed by police cruiser traffic, paramedics rushed Mensah to hospital. The coroner describes it as a sudden death in the setting of a struggle, conducted electrical weapon, and pepper spray. Mensah's family describes it as a brutal police killing for no good reason.
He asked me to lay down. He lay down without resisting. And they came and bounced on him, started tasing him. Meanwhile, he didn't even punch anyone. He didn't hold any object. Nothing whatsoever to threaten them. Why must they kill him? That's our main question.
Their other question, did Mensah's race play a role?
Our nephew, like he was a white guy, a white boy, would they kill him in such a way? I don't think they would even kill him.
A shocking series of events and a shocking use of force that they've described. What we had here was a young black man who was in the street near his home. Why did they even follow him into his backyard? What assumptions were they making about him to lead to that?
This retired police officer and use of force expert says it isn't clear why officers engaged with Mensah once he was alone in his backyard.
If you isolated him in that backyard, who's he going to hurt? Why didn't you step back? Why didn't you call for your crisis support teams or intervention teams? You know, why didn't you call for the SWAT team, for goodness sakes? You know, they've got more equipment and better training than frontline people. So therein lies the problem.
Whether or not any of this is a problem for the SIU remains to be seen. Its investigation still ongoing. Mensah's fatal interaction with police lasted just a few minutes. as his family's wait for answers is now in its second year. Trevor Dunn, CBC News, Toronto.
What does a by-election look like, not only in the middle of the pandemic, but also during a stay-at-home order?
Given the challenges, I will be very surprised if there's a large turnout at the polling station.
After their councillor was kicked out of office, residents of one ward in Scarborough will go to the polls tomorrow in a municipal by-election. More on that after the break. $69. That's how much the average Toronto homeowner will pay this year in tax increases as the city deals with their budget for 2021. The city's books have been ravaged since the start of the pandemic.
We would love to have an indication from the Government of Canada and Province of Ontario sooner rather than later.
This fiscal year, Toronto is expected to face $2.2 billion in financial pressures, the bulk of that directly due to COVID-19. Some of the shortfall has been covered through savings and emergency funding. And Mayor Tory is confident the other levels of government will step up. If the money comes, the city will be able to raise property taxes at the rate of inflation, and it won't have to reduce services such as the TTC. An important by-election takes place tomorrow in Scarborough Agincourt. Ward 22 has been without a councillor since Jim Karagianis was removed due to a campaign finance violation. Despite the pandemic and stay-at-home order, Election Day is going ahead. The city ensuring residents that it will be safe for people to cast their ballots in person. But as Ali Chiasson reports, some now worry about voter turnout.
We need a voice. We badly need a voice.
27 candidates are vying for the vacant councillor seat of Scarborough Agincourt, aka Ward 22.
We have been without a councillor since the end of September.
That's after former councillor Jim Karagianis got the boot over a campaign spending violation. And so a by-election was launched to replace him in the inopportune time of a pandemic.
We are the first ward to use mail-in voting. We are doing this election during COVID.
The advance polls were held last week before the stay-at-home order. Those numbers plus the mail-in ballots tally to just over 6,300 votes for a ward of well over 100,000 people.
Given the challenges, I will be very surprised if there's a large turnout at the polling station.
Tomorrow is Election Day for Scarborough Agincourt. Despite the stay-at-home order, people are allowed to vote in person at polling stations. As candidate Tony Luck points out, you have the province saying,
everyone should stay at home. Do not go out.
While Toronto elections,
it's okay. You can go and vote. There's a lot of confusion.
He even wrote to the city clerk
to ask them to postpone the election.
It didn't work.
2 meters or 6 feet apart.
The office of the city clerk says they're confident that the health and safety measures put in place will keep electors, candidates, and election staff safe on Election Day.
It will be the safest place to be to cast a ballot.
Candidate Rocco Achampong says his campaign adapted just fine over the last 60 days.
You may not be shaking hands, but you'll be socially distant and hearing the issues.
Hearing an eager candidate make their pitch in the last hour,
on sensible roadway markings, listen to them on whether or not we want so many pot shops around, listen to them on road safety, and for the first time in a long time, they'll have a champion at City Hall.
Almost brings a comforting sense of normalcy to this very unusual by-election. Now if they can just count on the votes.
What's at stake here?
What's at stake is our voice for Ward 22.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Mainly cloudy tonight with a bit of drizzle, currently 3 degrees downtown. Let's go now to our meteorologist, Colette Kennedy. And Colette, we've been pretty spoiled. Another mild day, though I know a system is heading our way that will be changing things.
Yeah, exactly, Kelda. But you know, you point out the mild temperatures, and they're really important as this system is moving in. It's the reason why for most of the GTA, this is a rain event with a bit of a mix, whereas other parts of the province are actually going to see some significant snowfall and accumulating snow. So the mild temperatures, I don't know if you want to be saved, but they are saving us a little bit. But again, tonight, I do want to mention a little bit of drizzle, some patchy fog, and some of that drizzle when it's freezing on contact. Yeah, that makes it a little bit slippery. So the rain that's coming in tomorrow, just know that it's going to be later in the day, like later afternoon into the early evening. And prior to that, not in the morning hours, because we have this other issue I just mentioned, but prior to that, we may see some sunny breaks coming through just before that system gets here. It'll be hard to enjoy, though, because windy conditions, those winds are going to be gusting out of the east as the day wears on. And then the snowfall accumulations, we will find that to the north and to the east. In fact, some special weather statements towards the nation's capital, where in that region 15 to 25 centimeters is possible. Talk about mild. Here's a look. Daytime highs today up to 5 degrees in Toronto, Windsor 5 degrees as well, slightly cooler than it was yesterday. Let's show you the timing on this. So tomorrow morning, moving into southwestern Ontario here too, mild temperatures getting into a mix. Then the temperature will be falling as this passes through. So more of a mix for the Windsor area once that happens. Comes in late afternoon to evening as rain, especially closer to the lakeshore, then turns over to some light snow overnight Friday into Saturday morning. Dundalk Highlands, places to the northwest of the city in the higher elevations, 5 to 10 centimeters, and then the heavier amounts that I mentioned that are going to be off towards the east of us. Otherwise, for the city, it just becomes that mix and then some flurry activity. You can see this one model just wanting to show a few centimeters in a couple of spots, not getting what we will be seeing here, where it'll be heavier, and certainly you could see over towards Ottawa wanting to give almost 25 centimeters there. Tonight, look at these mild temperatures still back into southwestern Ontario, and then changes coming with a wet day tomorrow, especially early in the day for you towards the GTA. This is what we're looking at, a repeat tonight of what we've been seeing the last few nights, but then tomorrow afternoon we might get some sunny breaks. Just know everything's going to change and those windy conditions are going to be with us. And speaking of changes that are coming, we will be getting back into some cooler air, but it really isn't showing up till the second half of the weekend and the beginning of next week. Kelda.
All right, thanks so much, Colette.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
Ottawa's Rideau Canal Skateway will open for the season as usual this month once the ice is safe to skate on, but it's subject to the rules laid out in Ontario's new stay-at-home order. The canal will only be open for exercise, which is allowed, but not for big gatherings, which is not. All concession stands and fire pits will be closed, and people must wear masks when they are on the ice. Ottawa's winter trails are also open, but officials are asking people to only use the outdoor amenities that are close to home. And that's our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Dwight Drummond has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.